Most daughters lose their home because the rent runs out. Lucy Tabia lost hers because when her parents divided their life in two, nobody remembered to count her. And then, on the worst night of her life, a stranger with an umbrella stopped on the pavement and offered her exactly what she had always needed. And Lucy, who had spent 29 years learning not to ask for anything, said yes before she understood what she was stepping into. This is the story of what it costs to survive alone for too long, and what it takes to finally stop. She had a small notebook she carried everywhere, dog-eared, well-used, filled with lines she would never say out loud. One of them read, "I am the one they love, in theory." She wrote it during her lunch break, sitting alone in the car park behind the diner, and then she closed the book and went back inside and smiled at the next table. A co-worker passed her once on one of those breaks and asked if she was okay. Lucy said, "Always." The co-worker nodded and walked on. This is the first thing you need to understand about Lucy Tabia. She was the kind of woman who kept everything running and never asked for credit. The second thing you need to understand is that the world had learned, slowly and completely, to take her at her word. If you have ever been the person everyone leans on but no one shows up for, you already know how this story begins. Stay with it, because this is also the story of how it ends. She had been on her feet for 6 hours when the morning rush finally thinned. Lucy moved through the diner the way water moves through a drain, fast, quiet, without resistance. Table 4 wanted their eggs redone. Table 7's coffee had gone cold. The couple at Table 2 were arguing about something low and sharp, and Lucy refilled their mugs with a smile so practiced it no longer cost her anything to give it. She knew this place the way you know something you have given too much of yourself to. She knew that the third stool at the counter wobbled, that the espresso machine screamed at exactly 9:14 every morning, that Mr. O.C. always ordered his oatmeal with honey on the side and a little too much hope in his eyes when he asked if she'd had a good week. And she had held this place together with 6 years of quiet competence, and no one had ever once thought to ask how she was holding up herself. At 10:47 a.m., her manager Dennis called her into the back office. She already knew. She'd trained Daniel herself, had walked him through the closing procedures, the supplier contacts, the temperamental register drawer that jammed if you pulled it too fast. She had written the training notes he used during his first week and covered his section twice when he called in sick during probation. Dennis had the decency to look somewhere near her left ear while he delivered the news. "You're excellent, Lucy," he said. "Nobody's saying otherwise, but Daniel is pursuing his degree, and management feels that, for a senior role, it sends the right message. You understand, don't you?" "You always understand." She nodded once. Clean and small, the way you nod when the thing happening is exactly the thing you expected, and you have already decided not to let it show. "Of course," she said. "I understand." She walked back out to the floor, picked up the coffee pot, smiled at table 9, and thought, "I understand that I have been here 6 years, and the man who now has my promotion has been here 6 months, and I am the one who taught him how to do this job." She kept moving, because that was what Lucy did. That was what Lucy had always done. The first call came at 12:31 p.m. She stepped into the narrow hallway beside the supply room and pressed the phone to her ear. Her landlord's voice was not unkind. That almost made it worse. "Miss Tabia, I've sent 3 letters. I need you out by Friday. The unit has been relisted. And I'm sorry. Friday. 48 hours. She stood very still for a moment, the way you stand when your body understands something before your mind is ready to admit it. Then her phone buzzed again. Her mother. She answered. "The house sold, Lucy. The lawyers finalized everything this morning. I know it's a lot to hear, but sweetheart, you are so capable. You always land on your feet. Gerald and I are going to need some time to settle in, but you are going to be fine. You have always been the strong one." The call lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Lucy said, "I know, Mom, I'm fine. Congratulations on the house." She hung up, stood in the hallway for a moment that could have been 10 seconds or 10 years. Then she walked back onto the floor, and she finished her shift. This is the part that will stay with you. And she finished her shift, every table, every refill, every smile. She did not leave early. She did not break down. She cleared every dish, wiped every surface, counted her tips into a small fold of cash. Then she folded her apron, carefully, like it was something that deserved to be treated well, and placed it on the counter. She picked up her backpack. She pushed through the door. The rain had already started. She sat down on the pavement outside, her back against the diner's brick wall, still in her uniform, the wet soaking through her clothes. She set her backpack beside her, clasped her hands in her lap, and she did not get up. People passed. No one stopped. She thought about calling her father. She opened his contact, stared at his name. Then she closed her phone. She thought about calling her mother back. She didn't. She sat in the rain and understood with a clarity she had no word for that she had nowhere to go. She was not what danger is supposed to look like. The woman, Mara, she would learn, was perhaps 50, or perhaps ageless in the way certain very composed women are. The kind of composure that comes not from ease but from years of deciding exactly how much of yourself to show. She wore a charcoal coat that fit too well to be off the rack. She'd been passing the diner window on her way in for a reservation when she paused, not fully stopped, just fractionally slowed, and through the glass had seen a woman in uniform fold her apron and place it on the counter with both hands, the way you handle something you still respect even as you leave it behind. She had stopped then, fully, and she had watched Lucy push through the door and sit down in the rain. She had gone inside, kept her reservation, and come back out 40 minutes later with her umbrella already open. She held it over Lucy's head without asking. She did not look around to see who was watching. She simply looked at Lucy, steady, unhurried, the way very few people had ever looked at her. And here is what made it dangerous. It felt like being seen, not pitied, not assessed, seen. And Lucy Tabia, who had spent 29 years making herself invisible so that other people could feel comfortable, had no defense at all against that. "You've been sitting here since before I went in for my reservation," Mara said. "That's nearly 2 hours." It was not a question. Lucy said nothing. "Your uniform tells me you have just come off a shift," Mara continued. "Your backpack tells me you are not waiting for someone. And the way you're sitting tells me you have nowhere to be." Lucy's jaw tightened. She hated how accurate it was. She hated more that this stranger had assembled the full truth of her in under 10 seconds from 3 pieces of visible evidence when her own parents had missed it across an entire lifetime. "I'm fine," Lucy said. "I didn't ask if you were fine." A beat. I asked a question with my feet, not my mouth. I stopped. Most people didn't. That landed. Lucy looked away, down the wet street where the city continued its indifferent business. Taxis, umbrellas, people going somewhere. Mara crouched then, not stood over her. Crouched, coat and all, so their eyes were level. Up close, her face was precise. Sharp cheekbones, careful eyes, a mouth that looked like it chose its words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. "Do I run a catering company?" Mara said. "Upscale events, corporate dinners, private functions, the kind of clients who notice when the service isn't flawless. I need a live-in member of staff. The room is small, but it's clean, above the kitchen, and it comes with meals and a proper wage. Not a favor, not charity. I don't do charity. I do fair." Something in Lucy recognized that language before her mind caught up to it. I do fair. It was the language of usefulness, of transaction, of I need something and so do you. It was the only language Lucy had ever been truly fluent in. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "I know you folded your apron before you sat down." The faintest shift in Mara's expression, not quite a smile, but the shape of one. People who do that at the end of a bad day have a standard. That is all I need to know to start. And that was the moment, not the umbrella, not the offer of a room or a wage. That was the moment Lucy felt the walls she had built around herself develop its first serious crack. Because no one, not her manager, not her mother, not her father on his cheerful 3 weekly calls, had ever noticed the apron. She stood up slowly. Her knees were stiff from the cold pavement. She picked up her backpack and slung it over one shoulder, aware of every sensible instinct, firing small, quiet warnings. "You don't know this woman. This is not how this works." And equally aware that she had 43 pounds, no room, and 47 hours until her name stopped being on a lease anywhere in the city. She followed Mara into the light. They walked in silence for half a block. And then Lucy asked the only question she had the presence of mind to form. "How did you know I'd say yes?" Mara didn't break stride. "I didn't," she said. A pause, one beat too long. "I just knew you didn't have anywhere else to go." Lucy told herself that was honesty. Plain-spoken, unvarnished, no performance. Better than the soft, comfortable lies she had been fed her whole life. She was still telling herself that when they turned off the main road into a narrow side street she didn't recognize, and Mara pressed a code into a keypad on a tall iron gate, and the gate opened without a sound. Inside the courtyard, 2 women were unloading crates from a van in silence. They didn't look up. They didn't greet Mara. They didn't speak to each other. They just worked. Heads down, movements tight and practiced, with a careful efficiency of people who have learned that drawing attention costs something. One of them glanced at Lucy for half a second. Not a welcome, a warning. Then she looked away. The room above the kitchen was exactly as described. Small, clean, a single bed with white linen, a window looking onto the courtyard below, a radiator that ticked quietly through the night. Lucy sat on the edge of the bed that first night and told herself she would give it 1 week. Just 1 week. Enough time to get her bearings, save a little, find something else. Something on her own terms, something she had chosen rather than collapsed into. She stayed 6 weeks, and every day the idea of leaving became a little harder to locate. Buried under something she had not felt in so long she'd almost forgotten it had a name. The feeling was this: she was good at something, and someone was watching her be good at it, and that someone said so. The catering operation was run with military precision. Mara's clients were the kind of people who paid for the version of an event that looked effortless, which meant every effort was invisible, every detail accounted for, every contingency planned. Lucy had spent 6 years managing a diner section with 30 covers and a broken espresso machine. She stepped into Mara's kitchen and understood the language immediately. Within her first week, she had reorganized the inventory system, color-coded the prep schedule by event type, and caught a supplier invoice that was overcharging by 12% on linen rentals. She brought it to Mara quietly, not wanting to overstep. Mara looked at the figures. Then she looked at Lucy. "This has been running for 8 months. How did you find it in 4 days?" "I was looking at the wrong column first," Lucy said. Then I looked at the right one." Mara said nothing for a moment. Then she pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down and gestured for Lucy to do the same. And for the next 40 minutes, she asked Lucy questions. Not about her CV, not about her experience, about how she thought, what she noticed, what she did when the numbers didn't add up. It was the longest conversation anyone had initiated with Lucy in years. She left it feeling something embarrassingly close to joy, and hated herself slightly for how little it had taken. The other workers watched. There were 4 of them. Desta, quiet and precise. Amara, who moved fast and spoke rarely. 2 others whose names Lucy learned slowly because they gave them reluctantly. They were not unfriendly exactly. They were careful. There is a difference. Desta tried twice in that first fortnight. The first time, she fell into step beside Lucy during a stock run and said, without looking at her, "Be careful what you put your name to here." Lucy had glanced at her. Desta was already moving ahead, lifting a crate, face neutral. Lucy filed it under the general wariness of people who didn't know her yet. The second time, Desta said even less, just placed her hand briefly on Lucy's arm when Mara left the room after asking Lucy to sign off on a delivery manifest, and held her eyes for one weighted second. Lucy signed the manifest. She told herself it was jealousy, that Desta had been there longest and didn't appreciate someone new coming in and reorganizing systems and sitting at the kitchen table having 40-minute conversations with Mara. She had seen it before, at the diner. On every job she had ever held. She understood it. She didn't hold it against her, and so she signed the next form without thinking about it at all. The documents had been accumulating since day 1. She understood that only later, lying awake, counting. The delivery manifest on her first week. The supplier agreement she had initialed on page 3 without reading pages 1 and 2. The staff register with her national insurance number, her date of birth, her old address. 2 forms Mara had placed in front of her at the end of busy event days, pen already uncapped, with a quick just the bottom line, "It's routine." A document she had signed during her second week that she had assumed was a standard employment contract and had not read because Mara had been speaking while she signed it and she had not wanted to be rude by making her wait. In 6 documents. 6 times she had chosen not to seem difficult. 6 times she had made herself small. And she had done it in a kitchen where a woman had told her she didn't have to anymore, and she hadn't noticed the irony at all. It was a Tuesday evening after a large corporate event had been packed down and the kitchen cleaned. The other workers had gone upstairs. Mara set 2 cups of coffee on the table, one black, one with oat milk and no sugar, the way Lucy took it, the way she had mentioned it precisely once, 3 weeks ago. She said it in front of Lucy without comment. "Tell me about your parents," Mara said. Lucy stiffened. Mara saw it and didn't look away. The silence stretched. Lucy wrapped both hands around the mug, the oat milk, the no sugar, the fact that she remembered. "They divorced," Lucy said. "There wasn't really a plan for me after that." She'd been 24 when they told her. She had driven 2 hours for Sunday lunch, walked in through the front door, and her parents had been sitting at the kitchen table, not eating, when she had known before either of them opened their mouth. Her father spoke first. Mutual, amicable, the right thing. Her mother nodded in the tight way of someone for whom the full truth was more complicated than there was time to explain. What neither of them said, what neither of them seemed to notice they hadn't said, was, "And here is what happens to you." Lucy had eaten her lunch, washed the dishes, driven home, told herself she was fine. What she had not understood then was that the divorce was not the wound. The divorce was the moment the wound became visible, because Lucy had always been the third consideration, not unloved. She was sure they loved her, both of them, in their way. But love and priority are not the same thing, and in her family, Lucy, had always come after the thing that pressed harder and louder than a child who had learned not to press at all. Her mother had moved in with Gerald within 3 months. A new house with a home office that had a pull-out sofa shone to Lucy with a brightness that dared her to ask for more. She hadn't asked. Her father had taken a transfer to Edinburgh and called every 3 weeks with the kind of optimism that cost him nothing because it required nothing of him. "You're thriving. I can hear it. You have always been the resilient one." She had understood gradually and then all at once that these were not compliments. They were permissions. Permission to close the file marked Lucy and get back to his own life with a clear conscience. She'd been evicted from her parents' futures long before she was evicted from her flat. She just hadn't had the language for it until she was sitting in the rain with 43 pounds and 47 hours left on a lease. There should have been a plan, Mara said. A pause, quiet and absolute. You don't have to keep making yourself small, Lucy. Not here. No one had ever said that to her. Not one person in 29 years. She went to bed that night feeling something that took her until 2 a.m. to identify. Safe. She felt safe. And she was so relieved by it that she did not stop to ask herself a single question about the woman who had made her feel that way. Not one question about who Mara was before the umbrella, before the courtyard, before the oat milk she had remembered. Not one question about the documents she had been signing. She slept deeply. The radiator ticked. Downstairs, in the office below her room, a light was still on. In the morning, Lucy found a folder on the kitchen table with her name on it. Her full name, her national insurance number, her old address. Mara was already gone for a client meeting. Inside was a contract she had no memory of signing. At the bottom of the last page, in the section marked Authorized Signatory, was her signature. Clean. Dated 3 weeks ago, for a business account she had never heard of. It started, really, with a filing cabinet left 2 inches open. Mara had asked her to pull the catering license for a council renewal. 3rd drawer, green folder, left side. Simple enough. She pulled the drawer, found the green folder, and as she lifted it out, a second folder slid forward and fell open against the drawer's edge. She almost pushed it back without looking. The word that stopped her was her own name, Lucy Adiz Tabia. On her full name, the middle name her grandmother had given her at birth, and which appeared on almost nothing she had ever signed professionally. Printed in the field marked responsible person on an HMRC tax registration document for a business called Northgate Provisions Limited, a name she had never heard in her life. She stood very still. She told herself it was a clerical error, the kind of thing that happens when you process too much paperwork too fast. She put the folder back, found the catering license, and took it upstairs. But her hands were not quite steady on the stairs. That afternoon, she found Mara reviewing a client brief and set the catering license on the desk. Then she said, as evenly as she could manage, "When I was getting the license, I saw a tax document with my name on it for something called Northgate Provisions. I don't think I know what that is." Mara looked up. Her expression did not change in any way Lucy could specifically identify. Something in it, some quality of openness, closed very slightly, like a shutter adjusting against too much light. Then she smiled, warm, reassuring. "That's one of the supply subsidiaries," Mara said. "HMRC requires a named responsible person for each trading entity, and we rotate that through senior staff for compliance purposes. It's standard practice in operations this size. Your name went on there when I moved you into a senior operations role. That's my oversight. I'll send you the full structure document tonight so you have the context." Already looking back at the brief. "Can you chase the florals for Saturday?" "Dan, the supplier hasn't confirmed the centerpieces and we're 48 hours out." The conversation lasted 63 seconds. Lucy counted them later, lying awake. Because that was the thing. She had been redirected so smoothly, so warmly, so completely, that she was halfway through composing the email to the florist before she registered that Mara had not answered her question. She had explained around it, used language Lucy didn't know well enough to push back on, trading entity, compliance purposes, structural rotation, and wrapped it in the tone of a woman who found the whole thing mildly boring rather than alarming. And Lucy, who had spent her life not wanting to seem difficult, had nodded and left the room. The structure document never came. She sat up in the dark and counted. 6 documents she had put her name to without reading. 6 times she had trusted the warmth of the room and the steadiness of Mara's voice over the instinct that said, "Slow down. Look at what you are holding." She thought about Desta's hand on her arm. "Be careful what you put your name to here." She had called it jealousy. She needed to find that folder again, read all of it, every page, before Mara was in the building. She pulled on her clothes and moved to the door. She had almost reached the bottom of the stairs when she saw it. The office light was on. Through the gap in the door, Mara, not asleep, not away on a call, but sitting at the desk at midnight with the green folder open in front of her. Next to it, a second folder, and a third, all open, all bearing names. And Mara was writing, slowly, carefully, with the particular focus of someone who is not working late, someone who is making sure something is ready before morning. She did not go into the office. She stood at the bottom of the stairs and watched the thin bar of light under the door, listening to the soft, deliberate scratch of Mara's pen on paper. Then she turned around. She needed to think, and she needed to talk to Desta. She found her the next morning in the cold store, doing inventory alone. Lucy stepped inside and pulled the door almost closed. Desta looked up. She did not look surprised. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for a conversation she had already rehearsed. "I saw her last night," Lucy said. "Folders open, writing at midnight." Desta set her clipboard down slowly. "And how many documents have you signed since you got here?" "6, that I remember." "And how many did you read?" The cold store hummed. Lucy said nothing. Desta nodded once, the nod of a woman receiving confirmation of something she already knew, and reached into the back of the bottom shelf behind a stack of catering trays and pulled out a folder, brown, unmarked, held shut with a rubber band worn thin from repeated use. Inside were pay stubs, months of them, from multiple workers, showing hours that didn't match the figures in the payroll files Lucy helped maintain. 12-hour days logged as 8, 6-day weeks recorded as 4. Overtime that vanished between the timesheet and the bank transfer, quietly and consistently, the way money disappears when the person it belongs to has no contract solid enough to stand on. Behind the pay stubs were contracts, names she didn't recognize on documents bearing the same structure, the same clauses, the same business account references she had seen on the HMRC filing with her own name. Different workers, different dates, same template, same trap. "How long have you been building this?" Lucy asked. 11 months, Desta said, "since the woman before you left." Lucy looked up. What happened to her? Desta turned to a section near the back of the folder and held it open. A printed email chain, a reference to a border force tip-off, a name, Yemi, and a date 6 months ago. Yemi found a document with her name on an account she didn't recognize. She went to Mara. Mara explained it away. A pause. 2 days later, immigration officials turned up at Yemi's cousin's house. Not Yemi's address, her cousin's, and Yemi had to leave the city. Whether Mara made that call, I cannot prove, but I know the timing. Lucy stood very still in the cold store and felt the full geometry of the trap assemble itself in her mind, clean, precise, and terrible. Mara didn't need women with legal status or stable lives. She needed women with nowhere to go, women who were grateful, women who had learned not to make a fuss, women who would sign 6 documents without reading them because they had spent their whole lives being told that asking too many questions was the same as being difficult. She didn't find them. She waited on pavements in the rain until they found her. "How many before Yemi?" "That I know of? 3, Desta said. Each one stayed 4 to 8 weeks. Each one left in a way that made it hard for them to come back and say anything credible. One was reported for theft. Nothing was ever proved, but the accusation followed her. One just disappeared." Desta's voice was flat and careful, the voice of someone who has processed this too many times to let it break through. "Your name is on 4 accounts, Lucy. I checked last week. 4 accounts, 4 business entities she had never heard of, registered in her name, processing money she had never seen, and her signature, given freely in moments of trust, sitting at the bottom of documents that could, if anyone chose to use them that way, make her look like the architect of all of it. Not a victim, the operator. She thought about the 63 seconds, the warm smile, the oat milk she had mentioned once, 3 weeks ago. "We have to go to someone," Lucy said. "The labor board, the police, someone." Desta looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that carries the weight of 11 months of deciding exactly this. "We can," she said, "but we need to be ready, because the moment Mara knows we're moving, she moves first. She always moves first." Lucy nodded. Her hands were steady. She was surprised to discover that. They stood in the cold store in silence for a moment, 2 women on either side of a decision that could not be unmade once they made it. Lucy thought about the pavement, the rain, the backpack, the 43 pounds. She thought about all the ways she had been made to feel small and all the ways she had cooperated with it. She thought, not again. She opened her mouth to say something, a plan, a next step, anything solid to stand on, and then they both heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside, unhurried, precise. Stopping directly outside the cold store door. The door opened. Mara stood in the frame, coat on, keys in hand, already dressed to leave. She looked at Lucy, then at Desta, then at the space between them where the folder had been 30 seconds ago. Her expression did not change. It never changed. But her eyes moved across the room with the calm, methodical sweep of someone who is not surprised by what she has found, only calculating what to do about it. "Morning," she said, and smiled. They had 30 minutes. That was how long Mara stood in the cold store doorway, smiling, asking about the centerpiece delivery, giving instructions about the evening setup, before she left for her client meeting. 30 minutes of Lucy nodding and answering and performing the version of herself that Mara had always known. Capable, composed, grateful. 30 minutes of Desta working quietly behind her, giving nothing away. The moment the courtyard gate clicked shut, they moved. Desta retrieved the folder. Lucy photographed every page, the pay stubs, the contracts, the mismatched names, the account numbers that matched the HMRC filing. Her hands did not shake. She was past shaking. She had arrived somewhere on the other side of fear that felt, surprisingly, like clarity. They agreed. Lucy would go to Mara directly that afternoon, and not to give her the chance to explain. There was nothing left to explain, but to put the documents on the table and make clear, plainly and without performance, that Lucy knew, that the next step was the labor board, and that the window for Mara to respond before that happened was closing. Desta held her arm before she left. "She won't shout," Desta said. "She won't threaten you directly. That's not how she works. Whatever she does, it won't look like what it is." Mara returned at 2:30. Lucy was already sitting in the office when she arrived, not hovering in the doorway, not asking permission, but seated in the chair across from Mara's desk with the folder open on the table and her phone face down beside it. Mara stopped in the doorway, took in the scene, sat down. She did not ask what this was about. And that was the first thing. She looked at the open folder and she did not ask what it was or how Lucy had found it. She simply sat down, crossed her hands on the desk, and waited. With the stillness of someone who has rehearsed for this room more times than Lucy had been in the building. "My name is on 4 business accounts I've never operated," Lucy said, her voice level. She had practiced it silently on the stairs. She delivered it the same way. "I have signed documents I was never given the chance to read. You have been processing my identity through companies I don't know exist. I want it stopped. I want my name removed from every account. And if it isn't, I go to the labor board with everything in this folder. Mara looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached across the desk, slowly, without drama, and picked up her phone. She turned slightly away. She spoke quietly, efficiently, for less than 2 minutes. Lucy heard fragments, an address, a name, the word undocumented used once, flatly, like a filing reference. Then Mara set the phone down and looked back at Lucy with the same expression she had worn since she walked through the door. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," Mara said. "Why don't we take the evening to think and talk again in the morning when things feel less heightened?" Lucy stared at her. She had expected deflection, corporate language, another 63-second redirect. What she had not expected was how ordinary it looked. A woman making a phone call, turning away, speaking quietly. No raised voice, no threat delivered to Lucy's face. Just a phone, a number, 2 minutes, and then a suggestion that they sleep on it. The most devastating thing about Mara was not that she was cruel. It was that cruelty in her hands looked exactly like administration. Lucy went back upstairs. She told herself the call could have been anything. A client, a supplier. She told herself she didn't know. 40 minutes later, she heard Desta's voice in the courtyard, sharp and high and nothing like her usual register. Lucy was at the window in seconds. Below, 2 men in lanyards she didn't recognize were speaking to Desta and Amara near the van. Desta had both hands raised, not in surrender, but in the particular way of someone trying to stay calm while everything in them is screaming. Amara had stepped back against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, a face the color of someone who has lived in fear of this exact moment for years and is now inside it. Lucy understood it then, completely, without any remaining room for doubt. Mara had not threatened her. She never threatened the person who was dangerous to her. She threatened the people that person had started to care about. Desta and Amara had nothing to do with the documents, the accounts, the confrontation. They were the message. They were Mara's way of saying, "This is what speaking costs. Not you, them." Lucy watched Desta below and felt something shift in her chest. Not grief exactly, not rage exactly, but something forged from both of them. Something that had a use. She picked up her backpack. She put the folder inside it. Desta's folder, 11 months of careful, silent evidence. She put her phone in her pocket. She looked around the small, clean room above the kitchen, the white linen, the ticking radiator, the window. She thought about what safety had cost her, what belonging had cost Desta, what silence had cost every woman whose name she had seen on those contracts, the ones who had disappeared, been discredited, been replaced. She thought, enough. And then she walked out of the room, down the stairs, through the kitchen, straight past Mara, who was standing in the hallway watching her with that same unreadable expression, and out through the courtyard gate without stopping, without looking back, without a single word. She was 3 streets away when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. A man's voice. Official. Flat. Careful. He said he was calling regarding a fraud investigation. And he said her name had come up as a registered operator of several business accounts currently under review. He said she was not, at this stage, under suspicion. But he would need her to come in. And he said it the way people say things when the words at this stage are doing a great deal of work. Mara had filed something in the 11 minutes since Lucy left the building. She stood on the pavement with the unknown number still glowing on her screen and made a decision in under 10 seconds. She did not call back. She understood one thing about the way Mara's world worked. Whoever moved second lost ground. The call was a warning dressed as procedure. A door held open just wide enough to suggest that walking through it on Mara's timeline was the sensible thing to do. Lucy turned her phone face down in her pocket and kept walking. Not back to the building. not toward any number Mara had given her. She walked toward the Employment and Labor Standards office on Carver Street, a building she had looked up twice in the last 48 hours and memorized the address of the way she memorized everything, quietly, without being asked, because careful people prepare for the rooms they hope they never have to enter. Then she was still in her uniform. She had thought about changing. She had stood in the small room above the kitchen that morning with a clean shirt in her hand and then put it back. She was not entirely sure why, except that the uniform was true. The stained collar and the worn apron hem and the name tag that still read Lucy in the font of a diner she no longer worked at. All of it was true. It was the document of what had actually happened to her. She was not going to walk into that building in clothes that made it easier to dismiss her. The woman at the front desk looked at her the way people look at someone they have already categorized before the conversation begins. Lucy set Desta's folder on the counter and asked to speak with a caseworker regarding a labor fraud complaint. The woman's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. She made a call. A man came out within 4 minutes. His name was Officer Reyes, younger than she expected, the careful, neutral face of someone trained to give nothing away in a first meeting. He took her to a small room with a table and 2 chairs and a water jug no one had refilled. He looked at the folder she placed between them. "Before we begin," he said, "I have to inform you that a complaint was filed this morning naming you as a person of interest in connection with fraudulent business registrations." "I know," Lucy said. "She filed it this morning, 11 minutes after I left the building." Something shifted almost imperceptibly in Reyes's posture. "Do you understand what you're doing by coming here?" "I understand that my name is on 4 accounts I never opened," Lucy said. "Then I understand that I signed documents I was never given the chance to read, in a building I moved into because I had nowhere else to go. I understand that the woman who put my name on those accounts has done it to at least 3 other women before me, and that 2 of them were reported to immigration services when they got too close to the truth." She held his gaze. "I understand all of it. I just don't have anything left to protect." She opened the folder. She turned it to face him, and she began. She talked for 47 minutes without stopping. She named every account. She described every document, the circumstances, the pen already uncapped, just the bottom line, its routine. She described Desta and Amara and Yemi, who had to leave the city 6 months ago. She described the courtyard, the 2 men with lanyards. Desta's hands raised in the cold afternoon air. She described the phone call she had watched Mara make. 2 minutes, turning away, the word undocumented used once like a filing reference. She laid every page of Desta's folder flat on the table in the order Desta had arranged them. The order of someone who had already understood that the day would come when it needed to be read by someone with the power to act on it. Reyes stopped her twice to clarify details. He did not look at her the way the front desk woman had. By the 3rd page of pay stubs, he had stopped writing and started photographing. At 4:47 p.m., he stepped out. He was gone for 9 minutes. When he came back, he was accompanied by a second officer and a woman who introduced herself as the deputy director of the labor fraud unit. She sat down, looked at the folder, looked at Lucy, and asked her to start from the beginning. Lucy started from the beginning. She spoke clearly and completely, and every word she said was true. And that, after 6 weeks of living inside a lie she hadn't known she was inside, felt like the first clean breath she had taken since a rainy pavement and a woman with an umbrella and a proposition that sounded exactly like what she had always needed to hear. The investigation opened that afternoon. Mara's business accounts were frozen by 6 p.m. A compliance officer arrived at the catering premises at 6:23 p.m. Desta called Lucy at 6:41 from a number she didn't recognize and said 3 words. They came in. And then the line went quiet, and Lucy heard her exhale, long and slow, the exhale of a woman setting down 11 months of weight. Lucy walked out of the building at 7:15 p.m. Oh, no job, no room, no Mara. The folder was in Reyes's custody now, signed into evidence. Her backpack was lighter. The city was the same city it had always been. Indifferent, moving, full of people going somewhere. She stood on the pavement outside the labor board and straightened her spine and breathed. The advocacy organization called it 9:17 the next morning. A woman named Priya from the Workers' Rights Coalition contacted through Reyes's office as part of the support protocol for exploitation cases. Her voice was brisk and warm in equal measure, the voice of someone who has seen the full breadth of what people survive and has decided to be useful about it rather than sentimental. We have emergency transitional housing available for workers exiting exploitation situations, Priya said. It's modest. 1 room, shared kitchen, short term while you stabilize. Are you interested? Lucy almost said, I don't want to be a burden. The words were right there, worn smooth from decades of use, ready to deploy. She caught them, set them down. They were not hers anymore. They belonged to the woman on the pavement who had not yet learned that accepting help is not the same as making yourself a problem. Yes, Lucy said, I'm interested. The building was on a quiet street in the east of the city. 4 stories, red brick, a buzzer panel with too many names on it. Priya walked her up 2 flights to a door at the end of a corridor that smelled like fresh paint and the particular quiet of a space that had recently been made clean for someone new. A bed, a window, a desk with no chair yet, light coming in from the east, thin and honest. Priya set the move-in form on the desk and pointed to the line at the top. Just your full name there and the date. She stepped back, busied herself checking the window latch. Lucy picked up the pen. She looked at the line. Resident name. She had written her name on 6 documents in the last 6 weeks without reading what came after it. She had given it away in increments. Her middle name, her national insurance number, her old address, and had not understood until it was almost too late that a name is not just what people call you. It is what the world holds you to. It is the thing that follows you in systems and files and frozen accounts and fraud investigations opened at 4:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Your name is the most powerful thing you own. Oh, and she had signed it away 6 times to a woman who had been waiting on a rainy pavement, specifically for someone who had not yet learned that. She wrote slowly, Lucy Adaiza Tabia, all 3, the full name, the one her grandmother had given her at birth, and which appeared on almost nothing she had ever signed professionally, until Mara had found it and used it as proof of something Lucy had never agreed to be. She was taking it back. Priya collected the form, told her the shared kitchen hours, left a leaflet for the legal support service, and was gone within 5 minutes. Efficient and kind in a way that asked nothing from Lucy in return, which was the rarest kind of kindness she had ever encountered. The door closed. Lucy was alone, truly alone, not the aloneness of a diner break, not the aloneness of a room above someone else's kitchen, alone in a space that had her name on the form downstairs, hers, not a cover story, not a registered operator, a resident. She opened her backpack. She found a pen and tore a small strip from the back page of her notebook, the one with I am the one they love in theory written in the front. She wrote her name on the strip, Lucy Tabia. She pressed the paper to the outside of the door. She looked at it for a moment. Then she went inside, closed the door behind her, sat down on the floor with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up, and she cried. Not from grief. She had carried grief for so long she had stopped being able to feel its edges. For the house that sold, the promotion that went to Daniel, the parents who loved her in theory, so the woman with the umbrella who had weaponized every good and hungry thing in her. She was not crying for any of that. She was crying because the floor she was sitting on was hers, because no one was going to knock on this door tonight and ask her to be useful. Because for the first time in 29 years, the only person she had to be in this room was Lucy. And just the plain and radical fact of it, was more than she had known how to hope for. She cried until she was empty. Then she sat in the quiet and breathed. She took out her phone. She opened her mother's text. "Lucy, are you okay?" She thought about all the ways she had answered that question across a lifetime. "I'm fine. I always land on my feet. You don't have to worry. I understand." Yet every answer designed to close the distance between what was true and what was easier for someone else to hear. She typed 3 words she had never sent to anyone in her life. Not yet. But she pressed send. She set the phone face up on the floor beside her. She looked at the ceiling, plain white, a small watermark in one corner, entirely imperfect and entirely hers. And she waited to see if her mother would answer. Most people lose their home because the rent runs out. Lucy Tabia lost hers because no one taught her she was allowed to stay. But here is what they don't tell you about losing everything. Sometimes, on the other side of it, in a small room that smells like fresh paint, with your name on the door in your own handwriting, you find out for the very first time exactly what you are made of. And it turns out to be more than enough. If Lucy's story moved you, if you have ever been the person who kept everything running while quietly falling apart, then you already know this story is not just hers. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Hit like so more people who need to hear it can find it, and drop a comment below. Whose story does Lucy remind you of? Yours? Someone you love? Someone you wish you had shown up for sooner? We will read everyone's comment. Thank you for watching.